Welcome to the Beesies.
I'm Abby.
I'm Brittany.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Mackenzie.
Remember the college days when you were best friends with your roommates?
We would come home and talk about anything and everything together.
We miss this phase so much that we decided we needed this quality roommate time again.
So welcome to the Beesies. Come over and get cozy with your new favorite roommates.
Fresh hello. Good morning. I know. I needed a good cold water in the morning is like always the best.
Isn't there a TikTok audio that's like refreshing? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Not
Pretty
that
sure
I
there
know
is.
of.
Now I sound crazy. Hopefully someone
No,
out
I'm
there
sure there is. There's like a
knows.
million TikTok sounds I never heard of before. So
It's like a deep voice. I'll find it and send it to you guys later.
like a deep voice. Ugh. I sound so weird and manly right now. It's okay.
Are you feeling sick?
No.
It's probably just because it's
early
the
in
morning.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. I was up late last night, but like
Were you partying?
yeah, so hard.
Oh, wait. Didn't
No.
you say you were talking to your sister or something?
I was with my sister. We went to the river and we
Oh,
paddleboarded down the river
fun.
last
Nice.
night. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then I didn't get home like super late, probably like by 9:30 because we went to dinner afterwards. And then Andrew and I just stayed up like talking because we caught up and everything. And we were actually laughing, guys. I have to share this with you. I don't even know if I should, but I will. He sent me on TikTok. It was like an AI bot created a script for a Trump rally. It was like,
Oh my gosh.
I told AI to watch this many hours of Trump rallies and then create a script. So here's what it generated.
Oh my gosh.
And I was reading it and I could not even get through it. I was laughing so hard. It was just so funny.
What was it like?
Let's see if I remember. It was like, I just got off the phone with the economy.
Oh my gosh.
We have created great jobs.
Yeah.
So many jobs.
So
Tall
many.
jobs. Great jobs. Steve Jobs.
That's great.
He
And
rose
it was
him.
like something about like foreign countries are coming after us. They're stealing our milk. China has stolen our milk. We only
Yeah,
have
they
one
have.
more milk left. Obama drank the last milk. No more milk. It was
I just got off the phone with the economy is like so real though.
Yeah, like I wouldn't question it.
Yeah.
The milk part, okay, but like
Yeah.
if it wasn't literally milk, I would 100% believe it.
Yeah.
Well, it was probably him talking about like vegans.
Oh,
That's where he
True.
probably
Who
like
knows?
picked it up.
that's so
It was like
funny.
2 pages of this, and I could not. I was laughing so hard. I couldn't even, I couldn't finish reading it. And then, at the begining, it was like set in an Arby's parking lot in somewhere, Ohio.
Nice.
Honestly true. That's
Honestly,
so funny.
when I ate meat, Arby's roast beef sandwiches were one of my favorites.
They're
Really
good.
Good.
They're really good.
I don't know when the last time I ate at an Arby's was.
I know, like people don't
Yeah.
like Arby's, but I did.
You know,
Mhm.
it's not bad. I definitely don't have it very often. They have really good French fries.
Yeah, I think I remember their curly fries, right? They have curly
Mhm.
fries?
They
Were, like,
do.
really good.
Yeah.
It's always like an Arby's. I always find Arby's in like small towns,
Totally.
especially. So like when my family would go to Eager. Oh, excuse me. I am so sorry.
Leave it in.
Please.
That's so funny.
embarrassing.
Anyway,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
it's just the Arby's. It got to you.
Could not control that. When my family would go like to Eager a lot, because that's where my grandpa's from, and there's always an Arby's there, and like in every small town you pass through, there's an Arby's, and I just remember it standing out so much to me,
yeah.
which is weird.
Arby's
So that's what they remind me of. is,
has
like,
the
little
same
vacations.
like relevance to me as like a Carl's Jr. Like I just
Yeah.
forget about them. Like when I'm thinking about fast food, they will never be the first or second or third or fourth to come to mind. So
Yeah.
Sometimes I
I get
miss
that.
eating meat so I can eat an Arby's roast beef sandwiches.
next time you're drunk. Then you
Speaking
can.
of missing phases in your life,
A perfect transition.
Yeah. today we're going to talk about our part 1 of our life and part 2 of our life. There's been this trend going around online where if you could divide your life into 2 parts, part 1, part 2, what is the event that happened in between the 2 parts that ultimately led you into part 2? It doesn't necessarily have to be like positive. Maybe part 2 of your life is really sucky right now, and that's just how it is.
Be that way.
I feel like it's really hard to divide your life up between 2 parts specifically. Like, I've been thinking about this, and it's like, I feel like there are so many parts.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that's hard.
I know, because, like, well, even with, like, specific things in my life, like, I was just talking to Derek. I was like, oh, in our relationship, like, the event that led us to part 2 was, like, moving in together.
Mhm.
But that, for
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
personal life, that's not, like, the defining
No, that's a good
event.
point.
Yeah, see, yes, that's so interesting.
Well, and that's what's kind of fun about this whole like thought or concept, whatever, of like a part 1, part 2 is it's like there are so many different ways you could distinguish it. Like for me, I was like, when do I feel like as a person I changed the most? Because I'm like, there was like multiple things I was thinking of, but then I was like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that was so gradual, but then like trying to pinpoint a
Mhm.
moment or even like a
Mhm.
year where I was like, okay, before that year and after that year, Brittany are 2 different people.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a chance to think about it? Do you think you have a moment?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I feel like the thing I've been thinking about is so obvious, but
We might have
also
the same
makes
one.
sense. And it is like a specific, like Brittany, you talked about like the year.
Yeah.
And I feel like everything happened for me in the span of a year. And it was like having Atlas and then also leaving the church. And
Yeah.
so that was all like age 25.
Mhm.
But if you had
like
to
when
choose
that-
one moment,
Yeah.
like one
And
or
that's
one
the thing.
event, not a moment.
I
but
don't know. I have to think more
I
specifically.
think I could pick
but-
it for you.
I think having Atlas.
Oh, no.
Well, I was going to say either having Atlas or going on your Morocco trip. Because I think
Yeah.
that was a huge turning point for you, at least in talking to you about it. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think you had like building blocks up until that point. But I think that trip was definitely like a turning point. Like there is
Mhm.
before that trip, Abby, and after that trip, Abby. You
I
know?
love that.
And
I love
same
that.
with having Atlas, but and like not in a good or a bad way, but I think Atlas was one of those big pushes,
Yeah.
you know? So
And even though like having a kid is so instant in the sense that like one day they're not here and the next that they are, it also feels sort of like gradual that your life
Mhm.
changes because of it. Like
But that's
does
still
happen very
like
quickly,
that could
but-
still be the reason
yeah.
why. Like
yeah.
it doesn't have to be like an instant.
Yeah. And so, but that's funny because it was like that trip to Morocco, it was a kind of like point where many things happened. Many thing happened. A many
a thing.
like that time, because that was also the trip where I was like, I think like when I come back, I'm not going to church anymore. And then like everything changed after that.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like one of those little like a little pause in my life where I could go on vacation for a month and then like come back, just
Mm-hmm.
change things I didn't want anymore.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I don't know. What have you been thinking about? I need to hear some more before I can really form my opinion. I need to talk with you guys about it before I can form my opinions, though.
Yeah.
This like trend is so interesting because like for me, leaving the church is that like
Yeah.
dividing
Mhm.
line. Like who I was before, I literally think of her as a different person.
Mm.
It just
Yeah.
changed the way I live my daily life.
Yeah.
What I think about, how I spend my time. And obviously there's still things that like you're unlearning and stuff, but it drastically changes your life
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the trajectory that you're on.
Totally. Well, because
Mhm.
that's the thing. And that's why, like, for you too, Abby, I feel like I wouldn't be shocked if that was like your moment as well, because it is in every single aspect of your life.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
when I was thinking about it, for me, it was definitely like 2020 to 2021 kind of vibes that I was thinking about,
Mhm.
just because of like, that's when I was done with school. I started working where I currently am, and then like COVID. But then I was like, honestly, I feel like when I felt that like change in who I am, like how you're talking about, Kenzie, it really was like, I would say, I guess that then what I was explaining would have been between like 2019 and 2021. I feel like COVID was more of like a turning point for me. Because I think that's when I saw a lot of my personal views start to change in like a dramatic way. Because I feel like up
Yeah.
until that point, I had never really questioned anything, whether that was politics, religion, just like personal values. And then obviously 2020 like shut down, but then things that did happen politically like really made me kind of take a step back and just be like, okay, what do I personally think? What do I value?
Mhm.
And I feel like I was actually thinking about that before we even talked about this. And I was thinking about like the first 6 months when I was working where I am, and just like, I don't even feel like I recognize her. Like, she's so different from
Mhm.
who I
Yeah.
am currently
Mhm.
for a multitude of reasons too, not even just
Mhm.
like views. I just am like, I'm so different now. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
it's just interesting.
Yeah, it is. Well, and I think the interesting part about it to me is that, like, as a society, I feel like that is felt
Oh,
across the board
totally.
between so many people. And I find it so interesting that a certain year, event, time, whatever, can, like, it's like a pressure cooker for a lot of people. And,
Totally.
like, it's crazy to think. I don't know. I felt like it was always so dramatic when like something would happen and they'd be like, this is going to change like the world, or like the world's never going to be the same
Yeah.
again. And it's like, okay, that's kind of dramatic. Like we're all still going to be the same, but it's like, oh wait, it actually does make sense because so many people
Totally.
come out of that situation like changing their beliefs or like just changing their lives in good ways or bad ways. Like you
Mhm.
come out different.
Yeah.
And when it's on such a massive scale that is like world altering, that's just
Yeah.
really interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to like rewind a little bit and then like go through each of our like
Yeah.
events and kind of talk about like what life looked like beforehand, what it looks like now, and like
Yeah.
how we're different.
I like that.
So Abby, we'll start with how did you decide what your
You go first, Kenzie.
Okay. Well, I was thinking like deciding to leave the church. I kind of already went into this, but like it is just crazy how it like changes like the trajectory and the path that you're on. Like beforehand it was like okay, like you know, there was this emphasis on marriage and like being temple worthy, and now it's like those aren't really things I even think about.
Yeah.
And that's like
Mhm.
huge when like beforehand that was all you thought
That was your
about.
only priority.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so that is like a daily like shift. Like
Mhm.
I don't like the fact that I used to be like think about that stuff all the time and now I don't, like that's so different. But also I think that like not even like the church specifically, just like how old was I? 21 when I decided to leave the church. Like I was the first out of like our friend group to leave the church. I wasn't the first in my family, but like I left before my boyfriend, and like it just kind of taught me that like I can choose the path that I want.
Oh,
And that's like a still right now, like that's a hard like lesson to learn, but like I look back on that and I think that like that was very brave of me for like recognizing that this doesn't serve me. In fact, it's doing the opposite of serving me.
yeah.
I'm going to leave this behind.
Well, and to do that arguably young. Like,
Mhm.
yes, 21, it's like, oh, you were 21. You had 21 whole years of life. But it's like, honestly, that's pretty young to make such a big decision, which is really cool to see, because I feel like that shows how you were already thinking more freely for yourself.
Mhm.
That's cool.
Those are my thoughts on
That's
it.
what that made me think of. I don't know. It's so interesting. I don't know if you guys experienced this at all, but like when I was growing up, I feel like I was always told that and like praised for me like choosing my own path and making my like being so strong-willed in my decisions, and like if you want something you go after it and you always make it happen. Like I was always told this. And then like I got older and realized that like I never actually made a decision about anything. I was only just like making decisions according to what the path that was like laid out for me.
Yeah.
So it's really like, I don't know, you saying that just made me think too, like now I'm trying to make my own decisions and like figure out like who I am, what path I want for the rest of my life, stuff like that. And it's like terrifying, but it messes with my head so much because I'm like, it's been so ingrained in me to believe that I am a person who is so confident and like good at making her choices, but I'm actually quite terrible at it. And it's like, wait, I don't know who to believe and what to believe anymore.
That's interesting that you
know.
say that, because I view that about myself. I feel like oftentimes do things for other people, and like I don't always think of like exactly what I want, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing, like whatever. But but I think that like you have to recognize is that like you do have a precedent for like choosing your own path. Like you chose to leave the church. That's a very brave thing to do. And like I think for me in my situation, like I said, I feel like sometimes I don't know what I'm doing with my life, but I can pinpoint moments where like I address something like head on, and the same way that I did like the church when I decided to leave. Like there was like, okay, no more like, oh, everything's fine, I'm just kind of like cruising. It was like, no, I'm going to address this and I'm going to act on it. And since then there have been other like moments in my life where I've done the same thing, where I'm like, I have to address this. Like, not to bring the mood down, but like earlier this year, like when I got tested for Huntington's, like it was like another brave moment that was like, I have to just address this and act accordingly.
And it's actually very interesting that I mean, obviously it's very like significant for other reasons, but like that you didn't like think of that diagnosis as a point that did change from before and after, because a lot of times I feel like that is a point for people, is like before they had cancer versus after they had cancer, or like something like that.
No, I was gonna choose that. The only thing is that it's still so fresh that I'm like, I don't know what part 2
How
looks
it's
like,
gonna
but it
change you.
absolutely will be in the future.
Yeah.
No, that's what I was going to say. I feel like that's like a part 3 or something. It's
Uh-huh.
like give it
Mhm.
even a year or two, and I
Yeah.
think you will look back and
Yeah.
see that for
Yeah.
sure. So interesting.
That is also an interesting concept to think that, like, when something happens and then we enter the next part in our lives, we actually have no idea, like,
yeah.
what's going on until, like, after the
Mhm.
fact when we have time to, like, reflect on it and
Mhm.
stuff. Do
Yeah.
you guys feel like you have, like, clarity about your present versus, like,
Ooh.
clarity about, like, the past you? Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay.
In ways, yes, but like how we're talking about it, like I in the moment of like shutdown would not have been like, oh, I'm about to be a whole new person. Like it
Mhm.
happens so gradually when you're in it that
Mhm.
you don't notice, even if it is like you were saying, like the pressure cooker where it's quicker than normal, or maybe there is like a breaking point. But I think in like what we're talking about, it truly is only when you look back, unless it is like so life altering. Like I think about people who are in like really bad accidents or like they do get a
Yeah.
diagnosis. I think those you have
Mhm.
that awareness in the moment.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of like the part 1, part 2, or even just like where you're at right now, because it's like, who knows, maybe I'm in like a changing point right
Uh-huh.
now, but I'm not
Uh-huh.
going to know that until I look back.
Mhm.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it depends.
Yeah.
But I personally don't think I have a good awareness of where I'm at.
I
in the
think as
moment.
I've
Yeah.
gotten older, I feel like I am a little bit more aware. But when I was younger, like there are so many times I'm like, oh, when I was younger, I thought this and I thought this about this situation, but now I see that it's this way. But
Mhm.
now I can look at a situation and look at it from a lot of different points of views
Yeah.
and recognize, oh, the way I'm like internalizing this situation might not be reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I sort of feel like I can never trust my reality sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
This was
Yeah.
actually something I like unpacked a lot in like therapy this week. So it was like, cuz I feel like the version of me that was 5 years ago would be making a lot different choices than like
Mhm.
the version me now would have made back then. And
What,
there, like,
5 years ago?
for
So
many
2019?
different things. Yeah, like maybe I would have wanted to get a different job or wanted to like date Andrew for a
Yeah.
little bit longer before we got married. Maybe I would have wanted to wait to have a kid. Like, you know, just
Yeah.
kind of significant life changes, like especially moving. Maybe I would have pushed more to like move after graduation outside of the state to live somewhere
Yeah.
else
Mm.
or whatever. And it's difficult for me to then think about that and then think like feel confident in the choices that I make now,
Yeah.
because I'm like, what is me in 5 years going to think about these choices? And like I almost have
Ooh.
anxiety thinking
That's
about
hard.
future Abby
Yeah.
versus like present Abby,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
not
feel that.
knowing how to like balance the two.
Well, I
Mhm.
think that's very valid,
know?
especially knowing like you're looking back and you're like, oh, I wouldn't have made that same choice.
Mhm.
And I think like the only comfort you can really give yourself is like, I still got to where I am. So it's like, even
Yeah.
if 5 years from now, Abby wouldn't make the same choice, it still will get you to being her, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like
Yeah.
5 years from now, Abby is still going to happen. Could it happen differently than, you know, that reality? Yes.
Mhm.
But
There's many
Yeah.
ways to get to the finish line.
totally, you're still going to get there and you're still going to be. I think what's important is that at the end of the day, you're becoming someone you're very proud of. Because it's like,
Mhm.
as long as that's how you feel, then the how you got there does matter, but not as
Yeah.
much.
And that's something that like I didn't expect to be so hard in my mid to late 20s is recognizing that like, oh crap, when between 18 and 21, like the world was my oyster and I
Mhm.
didn't realize at the time that
Oh,
that was my
Yeah.
time to go live in like New York City or a big city and like chase my dreams. Like
Yeah.
I like that's something that has been really hard in my mid-20s, is realizing that. And I was like, how was I supposed to know when I was 18?
No, I agree with that a lot. I've been thinking about that a lot because of going back to school, and especially because I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but going back to school for nursing specifically, especially because that's what I had started my degree in. And so it's like I've been having a hard time with that because I'm like, oh, I wish I could just go back to 17-year-old Britt and be like, hey, you actually do want to do this. But then I'm like, I genuinely don't think my life would look the way it does now. In so many ways, I'm like, if I would have been doing nursing, I wouldn't have come back home and lived here a semester early. And I probably wouldn't have met Scott, or like if I did, it would have been different, and I wouldn't be working where I am now. And I honestly think like working here has changed me like fundamentally in so many ways. So I'm like, I really would not get rid of all of that. It obviously would have been nice to like become a nurse, for example, 5-6 years earlier, or by the time I finished, like 10 years basically. But I'm like, it's so hard to not just focus on like the, oh, I could have done this sooner, and be like, well, but what else would I have missed out on? And I'm sure like that goes along. Like I was thinking about that a lot when you were talking, Abby, because it's like, it's so like easy to just slip into, oh, I could have already done this, or I could have been here. I could have gone and lived in New York already. I could have moved to a new state already. I could have waited to have children. Like, not saying that's how you feel, Abby, but like just throwing out examples. But it's like those things happen, and I can still live a life too. Like the reality is you could still move to a new state. You could still go and live in New York. It would be harder and it would look very different now, but I don't know.
I think I wonder too, like, you know, people always say that their 30s are like better than their 20s, and they like I don't know.
They say your 30s are your new
better,
20s.
Yeah. And I sort of wonder if this kind of has to do with that, because you live like, your early 20s, like not realizing what you are living through. And then your late 20s, you're like, man, I kind of regret not taking advantage of that time. So then when you get 30, you're like screw it, like I'm done. Like you almost reach this maturity where you're like done worrying about things, and you're like, I'm ready to just full confidently live in whatever choices I make, versus like being kind of more scared and like not taking advantage of all of that opportunity. I don't know.
This is
But I keep going back. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you're good.
I keep going back to this though, like I feel like we're like relating a lot on this, Abby, but like we just have to remind ourselves that like there have been these moments in our like early to mid 20s where we like were confident in our decisions, and we made those big decisions, and like those ultimately set the precedent and the foundation for like the big decisions we'll make in the future.
This is maybe a silly comparison, but I think it has a good theme. I saw this video yesterday of this girl in a bikini, and she was just like standing very normally, and then she like showed like 5 or 6 different things that she changed to pose, and her body looked completely different, like from the very beginning to the, and it's like a one take video, like there's not cuts or anything, it's not just a picture showing posing. And one of the comments was like, I can't believe I spent my 20s hating my body so much. Like, not saying like posing is everything, but I was like, I think this is such an important theme of like your 20s, especially. I think you're learning how to live your life specifically. And so it's like, it's easy to just hate it or to see the negative sides, but it's like, oh, maybe I just don't know how to make myself look good yet. Maybe I just haven't figured out what is right for Brittany yet. And so it's like, it's easy to just be like, oh, I don't look good, or I don't feel good, or my life isn't looking how I would want it to. And it's like, oh, wait, I just haven't learned how to prioritize the things I care about, or how to do the things I care about. And so it's like, I think that could be part of why like your 30s is so great too, is it's like, you've done, like you're saying, Kenzie, all that maturing to figure out like, oh, it's the exact same life, but I figured out how to live it better, or live it in the way I want to. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. Do you think we ever stop maturing?
No.
Like, I find the concept of being mature so funny when people are like, oh, you're so mature. Like, you're so mature for your age or like whatever. Like, I don't actually think that maturity or like wisdom is anything that like is finite. And I don't know. That's just kind of interesting of like, even though I'm probably like, oh yeah, I'm the most mature I've ever been. It's like, I still have so much more learning that I will do for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And it's like, just my mindset will be so different then than it is now. And
I do think it's
so many interesting concepts.
it is harder to mature and change when you're older, like over 40.
I feel
Like it's harder to change your mindset after you're 40.
Because I think just like culturally, people kind of like dig their heels in the sand on their beliefs. And
yeah, I wonder though. Well, I mean, that probably will continue, but
I think it's
I've
a
also
mindset.
met like many people who are older who still like are willing to change their minds, change their mindsets, change views, everything like that.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder if like just the newer generations, Gen Z being raised the way that they are, if they are ever going like, I don't know what that will be. I'm so curious what Gen Z is going to be like when they're in their 40s, if we're being honest.
Well, and it's interesting because like, at least like on social media, like Gen Z, call it cancel culture. I'm going to talk about like accountability. Like Gen Z is really focused on like people being held accountable. And so I think that will translate as Gen Z gets older. Like they'll be able to change because they hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maturity is so interesting because it's like there's so many ways to look at even what it is. But I think if you have an open mindset, then you like won't ever fully mature because it's like you're not going to come to the end of the term if you're still willing to grow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah. And I feel like even us just being raised in the age of the internet, like have an understanding that there's so much information out there, and like that can be a bad thing, but like there's so much information for us to learn, and like we never can know everything. And like the concept of when you learn new things, like your mindset changes and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. You guys hear like your parents and your grandparents and, you know, whoever say things like I'm not going to know everything. And so like, that's for God to know and for me to just like follow
Find out.
whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just thinking that's kind of interesting because we do also believe that it's like, yes, I'm not going to know everything, but rather than just leaving it up to like God to know and be like, I'm never going to know, so I just know the things I know and I'm good with that. It's like, I feel like people are so like, I don't know everything, and like if I want to know, I'm going to go find it out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it kind of ties into the like holding people accountable too, because it's like opposed to us just being like, I'm going to blindly trust you, or I'm going to blindly accept everything you're saying, whether it is like politics, religion, a celebrity, an influencer. It's like, you know what? If something seems off, I'm actually going to try and figure it out. Maybe there's not an answer, and maybe it like I'm off base. But like with cancel culture, it's like, oh, if people are like kind of suspicious of you, it's like, you know what? We're going to do a little deep dive on your past and see if there's anything that comes out. If nothing does, cool. But if something does, it's like, oops, what do you got to say about this?
Yeah.
So I think it really, like, it all kind of goes together.
Yeah.
Brittany, I wanted to ask about your part 1 and part 2. Like, if you, it's hard to do this like now, but like if you go back to like part 1 and like your daily thoughts and how you were kind of like internalizing the things happening in your life, what's the difference between like your thoughts then and your thoughts now?
I think politically is definitely a big one. I think I just didn't care at all
Mhm.
politically. And
Mhm.
so it like is the typical, like, I just believed what my parents believed. They just
Mhm.
believed what their parents believed.
Mhm.
But like I also was very much in like the confirmation bias. Like I would only even entertain things that like affirmed what I already
Mhm.
believed, opposed to like looking at both sides. Whereas like the point I'm at now is actually a lot more of like, I really would like to see like unbiased things of like both sides politically and
Mhm.
even like the neutral area and then go from there.
Mhm.
So that's like one thing that I feel a huge difference. I think another thing, and this definitely did come out of like shutdown, was, and it makes sense because I was coming off of like high school and then college where friends are your whole life. But
Mhm.
I think I just learned how much I truly value my family. And
Mhm.
like friends will always be second in the kindest way possible.
Wow.
It's
No,
just
I
the
I
way,
agree
but
with that.
like, but
No,
that's
I
the
get
thing
it.
is like, I was coming out of a phase of life, like almost a decade long phase where it's like, no, friends are the most important things. Like,
Mhm.
and I think so much of my self-worth was rooted in friendships too. And like we talk
Mhm.
about like FOMO and all of that. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I felt that so deeply to my core. Like I can think of so many moments just feeling so sad because it's like, oh, these friends are hanging out and I didn't get invited. Or there's all my friends are back in Tucson hanging out and I'm not there. And so
Mhm.
it like was a huge insecurity and being in shutdown, and part of it being like, oh, everyone's just with their family now. So there wasn't things to feel like you were missing out on really.
Mhm.
But then spending so much time with like my family and Scott's family and being like, oh, this is what really makes me like feel valued.
Mhm.
And friends are almost like the cherry on top. Whereas I think
Mhm.
before it was the opposite. It was like, as long as I have my friends and as long as I feel good there, then it's fine. And then relationships with my family were like the added bonus, but I never got to that because I was like, it was so rocky. And I don't want that to sound like I had terrible friends, but I think I just was so
Yeah.
insecure in my friendships.
It's not as constant too.
Totally.
Or like
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's a big part too, is like where I'm at now, my friendships are so much more secure. It's like I could not see you guys for a month and know that we're fine and know that like nothing's wrong and you don't hate me. It's just that like our schedules don't line up or something like that. And I know you guys are always going to be there as well. Like that's another big thing. But now it's like I focus on building up my family relationships because also it is way more secure. So it's like if we're looking at it like it's a Sunday, I always know my Sunday's there and then I can just add those fun toppings of friends, but I still have my Sunday at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those are two of the biggest areas I feel like I have changed like fundamentally.
And I think for like most people our age who like are maybe listening and like thinking of their like part 1, part 2, I feel like everyone in the early 20s can say that like part 1 had a lot to do with like, okay, how can I be accepted by others?
100%.
And like trying to fit in kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I increase my value? And by value, I mean what people think of me.
Yeah. And it's so much external validation. And that's probably the part that I think like if I'm like thinking how you were of like what's going to be my next like part, I think the making decisions fully for myself is what is like being developed right now and not having to seek that validation elsewhere. So, yeah.
And that's like a hard like skill. I don't know how like people go through life. You know those people that are just so confident and they do not care. They don't care about other people's feelings. They're like, I'm just gonna do me. Like I don't know how people do it. And
It's so
like their
impressive.
just confidence comes from within.
Yeah. It is very interesting.
It's fake probably.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
mean-
mean that is something.
Well,
I
it's better
believe
than me. Like
strongly
I have like
there.
a nervous breakdown anytime anyone has anything negative to say about me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
I like, yeah, I agree. I struggle so much with that. I'm like, if someone's like giving me constructive criticism at work, I'm like, do you hate me? Like, am I a
Yeah.
terrible
Aw.
person?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm so
Aw.
sorry. And they're like,
Yeah.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. Abby, did you feel like you said all of your piece on your part 1 and part 2? Was there anything else you were thinking of? I just didn't want to, I didn't know if you felt like you.
Right. Did I talk about it? Like, ask more? No. Yeah. So I was just like thinking, I'm deep in my thoughts right now.
Yeah.
If you're watching on YouTube, you probably see me just going like this, like
She's not high
whole time.
currently. She's thinking.
no, I'm just thinking. I'm very, very, yeah. So I feel like I keep saying that the person that I am now is so different from the person that I was back then. And it honestly is just like for unlimited amount of reasons. Like I could probably talk about every which way and everything like that. The thing that stands out to me right now, like in maybe it's just like in this moment or just in this time of my life in general, is that like the person I am now, the after person, is like very, like a lot more ambitious. And not necessarily in the way of like, I have goals and I'm going to go achieve them and I'm going to make a plan and do them, because a lot of it really is that I'm like fumbling my way through everything and I actually have no idea what I want. But ambitious in the way of like, I know that there's more and I like want more and I want to do everything
I love
to
that.
get
I like
more.
that.
Like know more of who I am, more happiness in my life, like more for my family. Whereas before, I think I was just like, I thought I had ambition, but I just had direction with like no ambition.
Yeah.
The reason I probably would say that Atlas may not be my like necessarily before is because, or like my line, my part
Event.
2, part 1
Yeah.
line event, is because I feel like having her was very much a part of my part 1 path. And
It
not
wasn't
that
necessarily something you fully chose for yourself.
yeah, like
You
I just
know?
really didn't think about it, because, and I'm still very happy about that, but like yeah, it wasn't really thought about fully. It was just kind of like, but that was the end. Like I think that maybe was what forced me to even like go to part 2, is that was the end. Like where was I to go from there in my life?
Well, you had
Because
accomplished
I
all
was
the things you're supposed to.
Exactly.
Essentially, like you had gotten married, you had a kid. Like, okay, you're done.
yeah.
You know?
Like I could have more kids, and then my life from then on was like dedicated to my kids' lives. And now it's like all of that still is true, but I also know that there's still more for me as well.
Yeah.
So that is like more of the person that I am, I think, now, and like what is different between my part 1 and part 2, you know?
Yeah. I think that's so cool too, because like when you grow up in, I think many religions, not necessarily just Mormon, but I think you grow up hearing like, this is what brings you happiness. Like this is the happiness. And so like hearing you talk about like, oh, there's even just more happiness out there for me and I get to discover it. It's like, that's a really cool shift too. Cause it's like, you were told like, oh, this is the happiness. Like you don't have to do anything else. You just have to be here. But it's like, well, but what about all these other things? Like I can actually feel happiness in so many ways. So I'm sure that's like something that like you should be very proud of yourself for, as well, as it's like you were told, nope, this is the happiness, this is it. But it's like, oh no, I get to seek it out on my own now, which is also way more rewarding.
Yeah.
So,
and like how kind of like sad to even think about like in your 20s not having anything else left to do except just continue your life as it is. Like I'm gonna be alive for another like
80 years,
70 years, or 60 years. Like that's real. Like there's nothing left, you know? So yeah. It's all, I think, like, and not to be confused again with like, oh, now I'm just living this full life, because like it is crazy, because the person I am is also like in the depths of everything and trying to figure it all out. But it's like that promise and that like idea of like I can still be ambitious. I can still have dreams and go after them. My dream doesn't just have to be go travel the world. It can also be to like achieve other things. Like that's an
Yeah.
achievement, but that's also just like an experience.
Yeah.
Whereas I think before, that's all I had like to look forward to was like experiences. Whereas now it's also just like achievements and like goals and things like that. I don't know.
That's really cool. What were you going to say earlier, Kenzie?
Oh, just that like I resonate with that idea so much. Just like, okay, I'm discovering this ambition, like seeing that like there's more happiness for me, but maybe right now I'm not like fully understanding what path to take to
Yeah.
get that, but
Mhm.
I know that I like deserve that and there is more out there for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah. It really is like people always said it and I sort of just didn't believe them, but like it really is scarier to like so much scarier to choose like your own path and like
Oh, yeah.
decide what to do because it's just like I said, I always thought that I was like I'm somebody who has ambition, who knows what they want, who can make decisions, blah blah blah, but it's like I'm in the middle of doing all of that and I'm like
Yeah.
I've never been more terrified
Well, I
Mhm.
don't
and
think
more unsure of things.
I don't think you like in the moment you realize how much opposition there is to like choosing your own path. Like a very trivial example and like huge theme I feel like you'll feel like with leaving the church, but with deciding to go back to school instead of like keep progressing my career, I've had like a lot of people give me pushback at work and been like in like a kind way, but like, oh, but like you have such a good trajectory here, like you could keep doing these steps and then like you'll make so much more money and all these things. And I'm
Mhm.
like, well, but it's not just about the money. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
be in retail as a mom personally. And so it's been like interesting. Like I literally had a conversation like that yesterday and like they have the best intentions. It is not coming from a place of like, I know what's right and you don't.
Mhm.
It's genuinely like, oh, but what if this is a really good option
Yeah.
and you've already worked so hard for it? And it's like, well, but that is not what I want anymore, you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
again, huge theme for leaving a church because that is so much opposition you get. And it's like, well, like, you don't know, like you could stay, you're already on such a good path here.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
Well,
but
and
that's not what I want.
yeah, and when like, you know, you're in your early 20s and you're making the right decision, you're getting married in the temple, you're going to institute, like you get that validation from your religion, like saying, "Yep, you're making
Totally.
the right choices."
You're on the right path.
Yeah.
It all comes back to that validation in your early 20s.
Yeah. Ugh.
Mhm. But like I do think that even work it doesn't like to you say like it's not as like significant, but I do feel like it is
Well,
because a lot of
yeah.
times like people's jobs, I mean people spend more time at least in America in their job than they do in their
That's
life.
true.
And so it is a part of like you are choosing the path for your like
Yeah.
everyday life. And it's like are you going to chase are you going to chase just like more and more money? Or are you going to do something that like makes you more happy, maybe allows you more time with your family? Like there's so many different factors and it's not I think simply just like where do you want to work? or
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
No.
that's a good point.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I definitely think I downplay it to myself. It's hard comparing it to something like religion that is quite literally in every single aspect of your life. But I think that theme, like I was saying, of like, you're on one path, but you realize it's not the right one for you.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
change will be so hard no matter what the
Yeah.
category
Mhm.
is. And you will
Yeah.
always have 100 people telling you not to do it.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
you will also have people supporting you.
Well,
So.
and like going back to your job, like
Mm-hmm.
that, like you kind of mentioned, like, oh, I don't want to work in retail when I have kids. Like your job is your livelihood, and like
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you're thinking, like in the future, what do I want when I have kids?
Totally.
And like props to you for not being offended by that person who like kind of pushed back, because
Oh,
like
yeah.
that can be hard to hear when like you're making this decision for your family and like
Mhm.
and your livelihood and like your future
Yeah.
children, your
Yeah.
future child's like livelihood.
No, totally. Well, and the person I was talking to, I was like, they actually are a parent. And so I was like, I feel bad saying that. And it's not that you're doing it wrong or anything. It's just that I know it's not something I want for myself. And that's okay. But, and I think what's really important, again, going major themes, is finding the people who do support you. Because there's been a couple times when I've like gone to Scott and I'm like, do you think I'm silly for doing this? Like, is this a bad decision or whatever? And he's like, I'm going to maybe cry, but that's fine. He's like, I'm so proud of you for doing it. Like, you should be really proud of yourself too. And it's like, those changes are so hard, but having a support system that supports you and is proud of you is like so important and pivotal.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have people who are like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
And it could be like, and that's what's hard is like sometimes people are projecting when they're like
totally
pushing back. Not saying that that person was projecting, but
it
like
could be.
just in general, like anytime someone pushes back on like your life decisions, it can be a projection.
I think about that a lot when people have like negative reactions to people leaving church even. I'm like, there's definitely a level of projection here. So it's interesting.
Yeah. But I also think it happens in the opposite way that I want to just like make note of, where like people who have left the church can also project their
Totally.
thoughts on like people who are still in, and
like, why haven't you left?
Yeah, it also feels like, I think, just as bad to those people. So,
well, I think that's where like at the root of it, me and my mom always talk about this analogy of like, we go to a restaurant and I order a salad and you order a steak. I don't think you're a terrible person for ordering a steak. Maybe it's a bad example because of like vegetarians and stuff. But anyways, I don't think you're a terrible person. It's not what I want. But I'm so happy that you ordered what you want. And I think that's how we have to support people, is like, you're doing this choice in your career. You're doing this choice for religion, politics, whatever it is. It's like, yeah, it's not the choice that like I'm making for myself, but I'm happy you're making something you're confident in.
Well, and that's the thing, like when you're talking about Scott, like Scott is like 100% on your team and like sees you as like the best version of yourself. He has no reason to project. He's not trying to like compete with you or whatever. So like finding those people that genuinely want the best for you and aren't going to project, I think is important.
Yeah, no, it really is. This was a good topic. When you texted and you were like, I don't think it could be a whole episode, I was like, no, it definitely can.
I think it can.
One, we talk a lot, but also I was like, this is something that like I think is really cool for people to unpack, because I think it has a lot of self-discovery of like, how do I value things, you know?
Yeah.
I always like topics like this a lot. So,
well, and it's so like funny that like we're in our 20s, but we're like part 1, part 2 of our lives.
Yeah.
But you can't, I think at any age, like,
oh, totally.
You can divide a part 1, part 2 and like recognize patterns and stuff. Interesting.
No,
And
totally.
it's like think about this is so ridiculous. Think about the Star Wars trilogy. There's nine episodes, and they're all different, but they're also in each individual trilogy. And so there's 3 different versions, and it's like you can my point is you can have different parts, a part of larger parts.
Yes.
And like, you know, maybe this is still our part 1 for like another sort of like storyline for us.
We're in the second movie.
We're in the second movie, and then we still have like,
it's Lion King 2.5.
Yes, Lion King 2.5. That's so good. Well, I hope you all have had introspection. Is that the right word? Probably not. This episode, and you're thinking about your own part 1 and part 2, and you know what? Just know that you're on your right path, whatever is right for you.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Ask your friends.
Yeah, and if
ask
not,
your friends
it's okay
around
to
you
pivot.
and your family members what their part 1s and part 2
Yeah.
are. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I want to ask everyone.
Right?
I'm going to ask everyone at dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Start a good family
Interesting.
discussion.
I want to know how that goes.
Emotional. I think I could guess almost everybody's, but we'll see. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cool.
Anyways, we'll see you all next Monday. We love you so
Bye.
much. Goodbye.
Bye, friends.